It might sound counterproductive as a contender to trade away aging but productive players, but sometimes there are players whose values might just be higher than the production that they're going to offer you or not offer you. So I have 5 aging veterans that I'm looking to sell before the start of the NFL season. Starting first, nice and easy, with Austin Ekeler, now acting as the RB2 or RB1B for the Washington Commanders. And I'm just going to be honest, I just don't want Austin Ekeler on any of my dynasty teams, period. In 14 games played last year, Ekeler averaged 85 yards and 0.5 touchdowns per game on 16 total touches per game. That's a 17-game pace of 1,300 total yards, 7 total touchdowns on 280 touches. That is horribly inefficient, averaging 3.5 yards per carry and 8.5 yards per reception. And because of that, he only averaged 13 fantasy points per game as the RB21 overall. What really saved his fantasy performances were touchdowns and massive target numbers. In fact, out of those 14 games that he played last year, he either scored over 20 PPR points thanks to either scoring twice or seeing 7+ targets in those games, or he scored under 12 PPR points. There was no in-between for Ekeler last year, and that's while playing 65 to 75% of snaps in a fairly mediocre offense. So now in Washington, he is not the best running back on the team. Brian Robinson is, so I expect Ekeler to take a backseat in snaps and touches, and I don't expect him to average the 5.5 targets per game that he was averaging last year because of playing fewer snaps, and Jaden Daniels is a mobile quarterback who would rather scramble than check it down to the running back. Not to mention that Brian Robinson is also just a very capable receiver himself, so Ekeler might just be playing the Antonio Gibson role as a receiving-only handcuff running back who, if you're lucky, might get you 8 to 10 fantasy points in most weeks. That's just not a player that I want on my team, especially as a contender, because I might get tricked into playing him more than I should, and he could wind up losing me weeks because of it. From DLF ADP, he's the RB37 overall, around other veterans like James Conner and Raheem Mostert, both of whom I would much rather have as a contender, or other dart throw running backs like Zach Moss, Jerome Ford, Kendre Miller, Gus Edwards, Devin Singletary. Again, I'm taking all of them over Austin Ekeler. I would also instantly accept any future random second round pick in any draft class basically, or try to use him to upgrade another position into a higher tier like at tight end or wide receiver. I just do not want Austin Ekeler on any contending rosters and do not want to take him into the season where he could plummet in value more than he already has. I do also want to include Nick Chubb into here too, more so just because that injury seems so devastating, and we know that even if running backs return a year after a huge knee injury, they're never really the same player, especially when that running back is currently 28 years old, turning 29 in a few months, and Nick Chubb is also going to be a free agent at the end of the year, so who really knows what his situation is going to be after this season. We've seen how quickly things can fall apart for running backs as they age out or add injuries to that age. Look at Todd Gurley, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, just numerous examples of father time ultimately winning. So again, like Ekeler, if you can flip Chubb for James Conner, Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson, Tony Pollard, anyone kind of like that to help you compete this year, I think is going to be way better for the 2024 season and beyond than holding on to Nick Chubb and hoping that he returns to form. The next player on this list is Keenan Allen, and I hate that this is where we're at with Keenan because he has been one of my favorite players in the league for a very long time, but the move to Chicago just took a lot of wind out of his sails from a fantasy football perspective. Now, this has nothing to do with Keenan Allen's talent or my expectation that he's going to fall off a cliff. That is not even a concern for me based on what I saw from him last year. He is still Keenan Allen. But Chicago just has so much going on right now with DJ Moore having a massive breakout season and then signing a long-term deal. They drafted Rome Odunze, they signed DeAndre Swift and Gerald Everett in free agency. And even though Caleb Williams is one of the best quarterback prospects of all time, he is still a rookie, and maybe he doesn't pan out or just doesn't have a strong rookie season in general. It wouldn't be all that uncommon for a top overall prospect to not have a strong rookie year. And then there's Keenan Allen himself, a 32-year-old wide receiver on the final year of his contract, so who knows where he's going to be playing next year if he stays in Chicago or signs to another contender to chase the Super Bowl. There's just a lot going on right now for me to really believe strongly that Keenan will be a major contributor to my contending rosters like he has been in years past. I think at best you're hoping for DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley production on their new teams, which is a 1,000-yard receiver, 7 to 8 touchdowns, but 13-ish fantasy points per game as mid wide receiver threes last year just really doesn't seem all that inspiring and isn't really all that different from a bunch of other receivers in the league right now. And again, I think that's what you're getting at best from Keenan Allen. Let's hope that he isn't the new Tyler Lockett getting pushed out by the flashier and younger first-round wide receiver, averaging 12 fantasy points per game as the wide receiver 39 last year. Or maybe he's going to have a major role shift a la Brandon Cooks on a new team, averaging under 11 points per game as the wide receiver 45. Or, God forbid, he's the new Michael Thomas. He gets completely phased out of his offense for younger and better players. He struggles with injuries like he has in the past. He's still going to score 8 to 10 points per game, but what is that doing for you other than just riding your bench, wondering how we even got here, and now you're that Wolverine meme yearning for the good old days of Keenan Allen. Right now, Keenan is around the wide receiver 50 in DLF ADP and on keep trade cut, which I think is also a testament to how many good receivers there are in the league that can all score relatively similarly, but a vast majority of them are 3, 4, even 5 years younger than Keenan Allen and possibly in better situations for higher end production this year too. I don't think it would take that much to turn Keenan into guys like Chris Godwin, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Amari Cooper, maybe even someone like Cooper Kupp, or you could just re-roll the dice entirely on a rookie or someone like Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, or Jalen Polk, where maybe they give you similar production this year, but due to their age, their values can rise and rise pretty dramatically, whereas Keenan is only going to go down from here. All right, now the next player is the biggest name on this list, and I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers with this one, but hear me out on just the overall process. Saquon Barkley has now entered a very interesting and quite frankly dangerous range of dynasty value for a 27-year-old running back. I did a study back in February around running back value cliffs and when the best time to sell running backs is in Dynasty, and let's just re-roll the tape of the conclusion of that study. So essentially, when you have a 27 or older running back valued as a top 12 Dynasty running back in ADP, there is a 25% chance that they finish as an RB1 and don't lose significant value in the following season. And this is exactly where Saquon Barkley is right now. He is 27 years old, valued as a Dynasty RB6 from DLF ADP and RB8 on keep trade cut, which means that there is a 50% shot on him even finishing as a fantasy RB1 this year, and another 50% shot that he maintains that value next year because he's never going to gain value from here on out because of his age. You're just hoping that he maintains it by producing as a fantasy RB1. And I just want to point out that Saquon Barkley has not finished higher than RB5 in a season since his rookie year in 2018, when he was actually the RB1 overall. In 2019, he was the RB7. 2020, he tore his ACL. 2021 was the bad year coming back from the ACL injury. 2022, he was the RB5. And then last year was the RB9 in fantasy points per game, but the RB13 overall because of 3 missed games. So over the past 5 seasons, Saquon has outproduced his RB6 to 8 ADP once. Just once. We are entirely banking on the fact that he's going to be so much better in Philadelphia just because it's a better offense. But is that really going to be the case? I mean, we just watched DeAndre Swift put up almost 1,300 yards and 6 touchdowns on 270 total touches. That was good for RB20 in fantasy last year. And sure, the dude was notoriously bad luck with getting tackled on the 1-yard line, but even if we give him 5 more touchdowns to put him at 11 total, that still only gets him to RB13 overall, which is actually right where Saquon Barkley was last year. And not to mention that 11 touchdowns would be the second most touchdowns that Saquon has had in a single season. Jalen Hurts is still there and still going to take away touches on the goal line. The tush push is still a legal play this year. The Eagles drafted Will Shipley, who is already getting rave reviews out of training camp, especially for his receiving ability. And the Eagles still have Kenneth Gainwell, again, most known for his work as a receiver out of the backfield. So we're really just hoping that Saquon can be very efficient and score touchdowns, which he's probably going to be, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure he's going to be a top 10 fantasy running back this year, but that still doesn't really live up to his RB6 to 8 Dynasty ADP when you factor in risk due to his age. If we were to get notified tomorrow that every single top 10 Dynasty running back tore his ACL in practice, whose value would drop the most? Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, right? I mean, it's because they're the oldest, and now we're talking about 28, 29-year-olds coming off of major knee injuries. That is exactly what happened to Nick Chubb. But Bijan's value wouldn't change much. Gibbs's value wouldn't change much. Even guys like Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, Devon Achane, Kenneth Walker, Jonathan Brooks, even all of those guys would lose value in the short term, but they'd have every opportunity to gain it back later because of their age. Saquon doesn't have that luxury and also doesn't have the elite league-breaking production that Christian McCaffrey offers either, that makes his price way more tolerable because he can just drop 30 fantasy points without even scoring a touchdown, and he can do that basically every single week. That is the difference between Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. So if you're a contender who has Saquon Barkley, I would be actively trying to pivot to a younger running back who is also just as productive. I would pay the age tax of like a Dynasty wide receiver 2 to 3-ish to move to Jahmyr Gibbs or Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson. I would side grade to Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, or Devon Achane to gain back some age. I would even entertain a tear down to Isaiah Pacheco or Jonathan Brooks if you got another big piece on top that helps you somewhere else. I would rather sell Saquon Barkley at a premium right now and then reinvest into older running backs like Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, or Alvin Kamara at much cheaper prices, because realistically, they all can score within just points of each other, and that isn't making a difference for your starting lineup, but it is making a difference for the overall value and health of your dynasty team because of what you were able to sell Saquon Barkley for right now. And the last two players that I want to sell as a contender are Davante Adams and Stefon Diggs, but I actually covered why I want to sell them in a previous video just a couple weeks ago, so you can check that video out right up here.